Flying squirrels in the forest, what a mouthful, is the jungle mouse at Chuanlord Holiday Manor. These kinds of rides are usually associated with roughness and pain, as they are not built by Western manufacturers and typically not in Western countries either. However, this Squirrel machinery installation is not only completely pain-free, but the somewhat janky profiling actually makes the ride quite rowdy in a good way. I will explain why in this review. Chuanlord Holiday Manor originally opened back in 2002, but they did not add any roller coasters until 2006. One of their earliest coasters was a Jungle Mouse RCDB does not know the manufacturer of. It ran for almost a decade until somewhere between 2015 and 2017. Immediately after that, Guohui Machinery was contracted to install one of their 05-V40H9 models on the exact same plot of land, and from the looks of it, I think this was absolutely a worthy successor. Flying Squirrels in the Forest is located really far from the park's main entrance, and due to the small stature of the ride and the fact that some very thick foliage surrounds it, it is a bit challenging to locate. There isn't that much theming on the ride or queue line aside from the cars being made to resemble mice, but all of the greenery does give the coaster a very natural appearance, and it is located right next to a large body of water, giving it a pretty nice backdrop. Chuanlord Holiday Manor's ticketing system is very different from most amusement parks. To get in, you purchase an entry ticket for a relatively low price, but to actually ride stuff, you need to spend points. These can be purchased in bulk at the main entrance or bought at the individual ride entrances when you run out. It is done this way because the park has a lot of other attractions aside from rides, like many animal enclosures which don't require points. This means that ride queues don't usually get very long because many people are hesitant to use their points or are already occupied doing something else. Though Flying Squirrels in the Forest's capacity is not high, so when I last visited on a major public holiday, it had built up a 15 to 20 minute wait. Operations were also not the fastest, as a single operator had to scan everyone's ticket before the guests put their stuff in the bins, and only then could they sit down and have their restraints checked. Being a jungle mouse, this coaster has 4 single-car vehicles which will be dispatched one after the other. They utilize inline seating for 2 people, giving a total capacity of 8 riders, though the operators will usually split 2 adults because it can get quite tight or they just don't want excess weight on the vehicles. The only restraint is a seatbelt that goes around the lap of each individual rider. This is very minimalistic and allows you to lift a pretty decent amount out of your seat on the airtime moments and be thrown quite far sideways on all the lateral moments. Once all the restraints are checked, you will hear the sound of a bell ringing, and then the ride dispatches into a left-hand turn out of the station before you ascend the 6-meter or 20-foot tall lift hill. At the top, you go around another slow turn before reaching a mid-course brake run. Because you just dropped off the lift hill, you are going extremely slowly, so you will not get trimmed in the slightest on this brake run. After that, you go into a curving first drop that is banked way too little for the speed it is taken at, resulting in a really sudden and powerful burst of laterals. Following that, the banking levels off, and because it is not around your heartline, it gives another very abrupt jolt of laterals, but in the opposite direction. Due to the huge amount of freedom the restraints afford you, the janky profiling really throws you around in an enjoyable way. I would not want to imagine how this section would feel if the ride had hard over-the-shoulder restraints. The following ascent has a very mild pop of airtime, but once again, because of the very loose restraints, this does lift you out of your seat a little bit. That leads into a pretty slow turn that doesn't have much force. Though, it is at the same level as the queue line, giving it a pretty cool visual both on and off ride. After that, you head into the second mid-course brake run. This does trim you ever so slightly, but the second half still manages to be very wild and enjoyable. That leads into a U-turn which slopes a little bit downwards. At the start, the laterals are not very strong, but as you build up speed, it will gradually strengthen. After a brief section of straight track, you go into another turn which gives some good sustained laterals. Next is a drop that looks rather unassuming, but do not be fooled. It actually gives a nice pop of floater airtime. Beware though, since the pullout can have a pretty hard landing, which can be quite uncomfortable. The following ascent chucks you out of your seat once again, this time without slamming your butt into the seat afterwards. Then, you go into another turn with some good laterals, before jumping up into the brakes, which unfortunately gives no airtime. Even though the brakes decelerate you at a very high rate, it is actually quite smooth and fluid and does not abruptly slam you forward like some other similar rides. Finally, you go around one last slow turn and return to the station where you disembark, ending the ride. In case you were wondering, this coaster is very smooth. There isn't the slightest hint of a rattle anywhere along the layout. The lone spot that can result in some discomfort is the hard landing following that small dip, but this can be braced for and is a small price to pay for that airtime. Otherwise, this ride does throw you around quite a lot, but that isn't a result of roughness, but rather the lack of banking on the turns and the somewhat janky profiling. So what would I rate Flying Squirrels in the Forest? I would give it a 6.5 out of 10. The track is very smooth, and although the shaping isn't the most refined, that is what gives the ride genuine character along with the extremely loose restraints. The pacing is quite good, and it has some great laterals as well as some fun airtime moments. That all makes this ride not feel too repetitive, in spite of the fact that the entire layout is made up of only left turns. So, what are your thoughts on Flying Squirrels in the Forest? Have you been on it or any of Gohoi Machinery's other roller coasters? If so, were you able to find any enjoyment out of the ride's unrefined and janky profiling? I would love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this coaster review, and I would be very grateful if you give this video a like and subscribe to my channel, since more videos will be coming soon. Thanks for watching.